Three, two, one. Hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here, Basketball Rewind. Today we're talking about prospects because, as Raptors fans, we're aware that we have potentially at least two, according to our GM, or more picks. And it's in the draft that some people want to say is so amazing. So let's talk about it. So with that being said, today we're going to be talking about Cody Williams. So when I started doing some research and I started looking into Cody Williams, I found out some interesting things about Cody Williams. First and foremost, I think Beyond knows where I'm going. Coach might know where I'm going, but do you guys know, before I get into Cody Williams' background or anything like that in terms of his wingspan and all that, do you know that he has a brother in the NBA? Do you know who his brother is? Anyone care to be the first person to buzz in on that one?
I'll just say this. I'm guessing he likes OKC to a degree.
He might.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so Jalen Williams is his brother. Jalen Williams on his off days actually goes watches his brother play. So he has an influence, and I really like when a person has NBA influence in their life as they're coming up, especially if it's a brother, especially if they're the younger brother, because usually it helps them kind of see directly, hey, it's not just back in the day I used to do this, but right now this is what it takes to be a professional. Certain Wagner twin, actually they're not twins, but I just say twins. Certain Wagner brother has had that influence on his younger brother in Orlando. Hopefully, OKC is able to not see that, and the brother is able to come to potentially a Raptors team. I like Cody Williams. I liked what I saw, just to kind of give a little bit of a preview of the episode. Let's talk about him. He's 6'8", taller than his brother coming in, for sure. His brother was measured at the combine, I think, without shoes at 6'5", and a three quarters. He's 6'8". I don't know what his wingspan is. Again, we're going to wait on that. He does need to put on a few pounds. I believe he's around 200, a little bit under 200 pounds, though, if I'm not mistaken, and you can definitely see it. The wingspan is long. Don't know exactly what it is, but it does look like a plus size wingspan for sure. So, those are my thoughts on Cody Williams. I don't know if either of you want to talk about the school that he goes to or anything like that. You want to chime in there. So I'll leave that, and then we'll just jump right into other parts of him. Anyone? Coach, I'll ask. I'll start with you.
So you're kind when you say 200 pounds. I think
Yeah,
I'm reading he's
I'm
more
adding,
185.
adding like 15 in my mind.
There's a lot of guys that need to eat a few bologna sandwiches in this draft. Man, they get some thin guys in this. Where a lot of guys around 200 pounds or under. But anyways, that's age and it comes with time.
Mhm.
So yeah, 6'8", number seventh ranked high school prospect in the country per ESPN last year, which is pretty good. Go to Perry High School in Arizona. As Kenyon said, he has a brother in the NBA, and I think when you know someone as close as a sibling in the NBA, you certainly gain more of a sense and an identity of what it's like to be in the NBA and the pressures that come along with it. Uh, 52% from three this year. He's averaging about two threes per game. So he's not a high volume shooter, but he came into this year and a lot of people were really concerned about his outside shooting. The mechanics look pretty good. In a sense, who he kind of reminds me of, and I'm not comparing his basketball wise, but he's kind of like this Kawhi Leonard esque. He's kind of a quiet dude, seems like laid back, doesn't wow you right away, but he seems to do everything fairly well. He seems to be a pretty good versatile defender. He's near almost 60% from the field this year, so he can really score in many different ways, especially with his expanding his 3-point game. Seems to be a pretty good defender for sure. And like Kenyon had said, 6'8". I'm going to take a guess and say his wingspan is probably around 7 foot. Just taking a guess. And we know the Raptors seem to be quite interested in those kinds of players. But if you are looking for like an elite athlete jump out of the gym prospect, I don't think that's him. I think he is just someone who can be quite versatile offensively and defensively. He seems to be pretty solid at just playing basketball in general. So he's not going to wow you, but I think he'll do everything, a jack of all trades, more or less. He'll do everything fairly well.
There's differences between a university of blank state versus blank state university versus whatever. Okay. He's in the Pac-12. He plays for University of Colorado Boulder,
Yep.
specifically. He's a Buffalo. I will also add before Beyond chimes in that he is a McDonald's All American, 5-star recruit, of course. The other thing is that he is, if I'm not mistaken, a state champion. So, Beyond, your thoughts on Mr. Williams?
Um, I must admit, I was for the most part pretty impressed. He was a little more polished than I thought he would be. Considering the reputation of this draft, you're coming in with a bit of a mindset everyone's going to be raw, like, extremely raw. He wasn't actually. It was pleasant to watch from that standpoint. I'll start with him offensively. I'm not sure we're going to split it offensive defensively. Um, Offensively, Coach mentioned he's got a nice stroke from three. He could get to the hoop. I think actually he's a little more sneakier athletically than maybe people give him credit for. I think it's one of those things where in college, some guys might not come off on it as an athlete because the plays they run in college that will actually be better for him in the NBA. Like for me, funny enough, Coach mentioned Kawhi. Actually, I see he reminds me more of his teammate. Actually, I see Paul George more when I see him. Actually, that's the guy I see. Where Paul George was like, oh, he'd be a nice little mid-range draft point, 6'8", 6'9" dude. You could dribble a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just popped in the NBA. And I'm not saying he's going to be Paul George. I'm just saying that he has more. I think that his game will open up more in the NBA. I think based on what I'm seeing here. There's one item I think that is, man. Let me tell you something, folks. All you AAU dudes, all you coaches out there, man. Enough with the floaters. It makes sense when they're 6'1". Enough with the floaters. This man's 6'8". That's without shoes. Get in the rim or pull up strong and pull up directly over a guy and rise up over a guy. What happened to rising up over a dude? This floater crap here, man. Leave that for 6'2" dudes. That's why they need it. They have to float over 7-foot dudes. When you're 6'8", just stop on a dime and pull up. So to me, that's the one thing I hope that he can, because that's an NBA shot. He gonna need to have a pull up because the floater that ain't gonna slide for 6'8" dudes in the NBA. You gotta be able to pull up and hit it right there square on a dime. So that's my one thing with him offensively. I was like, okay, we need to work on that. That needs to get worked on immediately. Whoever gets him. But overall, I liked his game, and I like the fact that he can get the hoop. Pretty good passer, pretty good playmaker. I think that's the other part that that was coming out as well too. You could do a little pick and roll action, which obviously in the NBA is a requirement. So like you have a wing that could do so. Now that don't matter much for this Raptor team because we don't put pick and rolls for wings. So that don't make sense. That'd be a waste of a skill set at this point for the Raptors. But for everybody else in the league, that's a good attribute to have. To have wings that can play pick and roll offense. Yeah, so I like him a lot in this case here. And by the way, I think they're a CU, Colorado University. So just for the
Yep. John C.
FYI.
Billups.
Exactly. They're like Kentucky in that sense. So they're the reverse.
I made
Or
that mistake
they're
of talking
they're
about Arizona and the wrong Arizona to the wrong person. They got very insulted. So I've learned.
Yeah, that's a big thing down south of the border, man.
or
I'll
Derek
leave
White.
it to
He
y'all.
actually went to the University of Colorado as well, I believe.
Derek White did.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he did. Yeah.
Nice. His brother, Jalen Williams, went to Santa Clara, spent 3 years. Now, I look at the advanced metrics between the two, right? Yes. I look at the advanced metrics between the two, and he's already putting up better offensive advanced metrics than his brother did in his final year. His brother spent multiple years in college. He was a junior, I believe is the correct term, because he spent 3 years. versus him. So he had what is it, a 5 offensive box plus minus. Now personally, I'm not the biggest fan of offensive box plus minus because I think it overvalues certain counting stats, but he's also been a better defensive prospect as well. We will get to the defense in a second, but based on the notes that I made before, Beyond did hit it on the head, so to speak, for a lot of things, but I said he's relatively efficient and effective, given his size. He's actually a fairly smooth mover, from what I noticed offensively. Now, I do have some concerns defensively overall beyond the weight, but I will get to them. One of the things that I noticed is that, to Beyond's point, a lot of people are trying to either develop that pull-up game or develop a floater game. I think right now, the floater games, it is what it is not consistent enough, but I also think too many people, to your point, are trying to develop a damn floater. Stop it. Okay? You're 6'8", just go to the rack. But I did find that he had no problems trying to find ways to slither his way to the hoop. Now, he's not quite Kobe Buffkin in terms of his slither ability, if you want to say that or use that terminology, but I would say that he did show good promise at snaking the pick and roll overall on, around, I think, 21% usage. He had a fairly high assist rate. He's a fairly strong, rebounder, fairly solid defensively as well, which I will get into soon. He had an okay assist to turnover ratio, although remember, he's not really a point guard. He is more of a point forward in the sense, but to me, especially as people are complaining about things on this team, I don't think you can have too many point forwards, especially when you're putting up. Coach was right. He was originally shooting up to 60%. It's come down a little bit, but still 50-50, and 71 is his splits overall, more or less close to that. That's pretty darn good. Smart at making passes. He's not a conservative passer per se, but he's also, he's not a flashy passer. So, gonna just compare him to Scotty Barnes for a second. Scotty does a lot of, no look passes and all. Sometimes that gets you into trouble. He can make a couple of small advanced reads, but he's not going crazy with the no look, crazy passes. He's just keeps it simple, stupid. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes you don't need everyone on your team making crazy, ridiculous passes. I think he's a bit of a, as I wrote down, he's a solid passer, playmaker, fits Raptors-esque players, but with a bit of, when I say but, I'm saying compared to most Raptors, he has a very high skill floor. Okay? We've had a lot of players that haven't had high skill floor. I do think, of course, I say this with almost every single player, the handle needs work, but the handle's a lot better than a lot of guys' handles on our team, to be perfectly honest, except for maybe RJ. Quickly needs work on his handle as well. But no offense to Scotty Barnes, but I'm just going to keep it a buck. His handle's better than Scotty Barnes. Scotty's more advanced in other ways in terms of his playmaking reads, probably. Yeah, sure. But his handle, as long as he's not going into multiple defenders, he's pretty good at keeping it simple and holding on to the ball. And obviously there's a bit of a strength element in that, but I think that he's overall pretty good from that standpoint. One of the things that I also noticed, he's a fairly good attacker and slasher. And that is something that can help him as he learns to create and get to the line. I think he got to the line a pretty fair amount of times so far based on his role. So 4 attempts a game, which is fairly solid. I think, again, I'm just going to compare him just because I know everyone's going to see playmaking or point forward. How does it compare to Scotty Barnes? So I wrote some stuff down. Scotty got to it around 2.8 times a game in terms of getting to the line, the charity stripe. Cody gets to it 4.1 times. So that to me, whenever I see that, it means that a guy, and you also see it in the film as well, he's good at actually attacking the hoop multiple times, and that aggression will get you to the line. He has a decent handle, as I said, and one of the other things that I've noticed, one of the things that I'm starting to look for these wing players is, yes, I'm tall, I'm big, but can he sit down in his stance in his drives And he does. I actually was pretty impressed with how low he was able to get in his stance and still maintain control as he's going forward, leaning into the defender without falling over. I think that that's a really important thing, and it suggests that he has decent core strength. If there's nothing else, oh, I added one other thing in my notes that I forgot to talk about. The finishing was decent. He seems to absorb contact fairly well at this level. Again, get away from the floater a bit, but he has the agility to kind of split soft double teams, and that's something that's kind of missing. We don't really have many people. Maybe Quickly is maybe the closest, but this guy's splitting double teams, not on every single play, but enough that I'm like, there's something there. And the fact that he can absorb contact, do that, what I would hope that he improves on is he has these long strides. I would like to see him mix those strides because he has the core strength for it with certain choppier footsteps and staccato style footsteps. That will help him to build up his craft, I think. And I think he has the natural balance for it to do it. So that's it for the offensive side.
And that's why you run with Paul George, those 2 points. The ability to drive, in this case, and stay low, and that splitting the double teams. Like Paul George is extremely crafty with that ball, in this case, for a guy his size. And Paul George is probably the closest 6'8", 6'9" guy out there I can think of, that when he dribbles, I think I'm watching a guard.
Yeah, like the way he plays on offense is very, he plays at his own pace. Like, he doesn't have the best first step, but he's still able to get to spots, and that's something that's really important. If you don't have the fastest first step, is can you like have enough craft to get to spots? He does. And that's very interesting to me. Yeah,
he does
yeah,
that too.
SGA.
But the thing with Cody, I've seen he could do a bit of everything fairly well, but I do worry about the athleticism around the rim. When he goes up against NBA guys who are like 6'11", 7 foot, that burst I do question. But I'll just say this, in this draft, and I've read some analysts have said he could go number 2 because this draft is so fluid, and quite frankly, it's another word of them saying, yeah, it's kind of weak. No really franchise or generational prospects, so he could go as high as 2, I would say. He could go as low as maybe 7 or 8. And if the Raptors keep their pick, he would be right there in the mix for them. But that's if they keep it. Because if they don't keep their pick, you ain't getting this guy. That's the way it is.
There is something to be said that we might be able to, again, because it's such a flat draft, to acquire a pick in the top 10, maybe not in the top 4, but in the top 10. And depending on, some of these international kids, they're going to be playing for longer. And usually when they're the only ones playing, they tend to move a little bit up. So it'll be very interesting from that standpoint to see where some of them go as well, a la Bilal Coulibaly as well. So yeah, I think there's not really much else. I will say this to my only counter to Coach's point is that having a brother in the NBA and probably someone that you can practice against sometimes, that gives you a lot of tidbits of information in terms of how to go up and how to finish through contact, et cetera, et cetera. Especially since, his brother has a little bit more girth to him, but he's actually bigger than his brother in terms of height wise. So that's at least someone that, gives him the information needed to unlock that. So we'll see. I like high floor players coming out of this draft. Full disclosure, before we go to the defensive end, maybe we could talk about this more at the very end in terms of draft philosophy coming into this draft, is I would stay away from major projects where the guy's not contributing for 2 years or a year and a half. Okay, so defensive end, he in general found a way to stay attached to guys. He's I think I've seen this as well, so I'll just use similar terminology. He's solid at recovery. The challenge that I have, though, is I'll compare it to Scotty Barnes. Scotty Barnes recovers really well. He's good at blocking shots. Do I always want a guy who's recovering well? The problem with that is that you're getting blown by. So I would like to see him stay a little bit more attached or learn how to use his positioning better. I think he has it, and I think he's smart enough for it. I worry a little bit about his ability to flip his hips, which is why positioning is really well to stay a little bit back, let your length do the work, If you do that, I think you'll be fine. Any of you guys have thoughts?
Well, I'll just say, just to add to it, it's like I think for both sides of the ball, he's very much a fairly responsible player. Like, in some ways, he's like the opposite of Keontae George. Actually, like if you think about it, like George gonna make the spectacular pass and stuff like that. He's gonna go for the he's gonna get the passing lanes and try to make the spectacular play defensively at times. He's more stay at home. I'm going to kind of make sure I just cover my spot. He's not going to blow you away statistically for all those steals and stuff like that, and the blocks perhaps as well too, and what Kenya is saying. But he's going to be responsible. And he seems to have a good awareness of where he is on the court and where everyone else is in the court. So he's not going to hurt you many times if he's in any sort of 5-man unit. And I think on either side of the ball, I think that's what I like about him, because I think going back to Kenya's point, the last point about if you're going to draft someone, especially from the Raptors standpoint, you don't want a raw person. That's what I like most. I feel if tomorrow he had to go and play for the Raptors, he would get minutes without a doubt. And I don't have to think about like, geez, well, I got to ramp him up after about 3 months. No, not like that. He could play 15 minutes, 20 minutes pretty quickly. I like him defensively, and that wingspan, the use of it, and how you'll be able to use it more. And sometimes you don't know when it comes to defense. Sometimes on both sides, you don't know what the philosophy of the coaching staff is really. So, Colorado's playing a more conservative type of defense. That might be the reason why he plays the way he plays right now. So, and then he gets let loose depending on what type of team he has. He gets drafted. So, I like him a lot. Instead of 4, I don't really have too much complaints from that standpoint. I think he's one of the few players we've seen early on, that if he was actually in last year's draft, if he got picked in the lottery, I wouldn't have been surprised. It's early still.
And he navigates screens fairly well. As he's not getting caught up on them as well, so that's also important. I agree with you, Coach.
Seems to play the gaps fairly well on defense, which is definitely going to be important. Sometimes you have guys that overplay the gaps, a la Gary Trent. And I don't know if that was so much Trent or if that was Nurse's philosophy last year. I'm guessing it was kind of more so Nurse's philosophy, because I haven't really seen Trent do that much this year. And quite frankly, Trent this year defensively has been really quiet. But Cody Williams, I mean, when you're 6'8" and you can do that fairly well. Like, I think what Beyond is touching on a bit more is just like his sense of the game, how he sees the floor, how he is kind of conservative in that sense. And if he's 6'8", he's going to be able to switch. That's the biggest thing that you can do right now on defense. Can you have enough switchable guys that you can put a guy on a point guard, or put a guy on a 4, put a guy on a 3 moving forward? So to me, he seems like he's just a good overall solid basketball player. Doesn't wow me in any way, shape, or form, but I can see how he's definitely gonna be there in that top 7-8 in the draft for sure.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, as of today, when we're filming this, so this is February 4th. He's ranked as 5th. He wasn't, so he could either rise up or go or fall back down or whatever. You never know if an injury happens. These guys, we see what happens sometimes. I was actually thinking about that earlier. It's just like not the perfect situation for the player, but for the team is like you catch. It's kind of like what happened with Embiid. I was thinking actually about Embiid and about Chet, and about how they got injured, and then all of a sudden their draft stock maybe fell back a bit, but they're still really good players. They still went really high, and then the team did get them the first year, but when they came ready. And it's because like they already had such a high floor, and it might be interesting to see if we might be able to capitalize on something like that this draft. I'm not hoping that anyone gets injured. Cody is not injured. I don't know if he will be around at our pick if we lose our pick. But what I would say is that if we ended up, sorry,
we just played a guy like that the other night in Houston.
Yes, exactly. So if we end up making a trade and trading up in this draft, he would be someone that I would be interested in. I can see him going anywhere between the 5 to say the 13 range, depending on what shakes out. And so far, in terms of a non-big player, there's not a lot of bigs to talk about in this draft, in my opinion. There's a couple, but not a lot, and we've already when this comes out. We've already talked about Kyle Filipowski. I would take him over for Kyle.
After I watched that Tar Heel game yesterday, I was like, ooh, it was a little rough, man. So no disrespect, I'm a Tar Heel guy, so Dookies, just chill, man. But you gotta admit, your boy had a tough day yesterday. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about other guys. There's always there's the French guys, Selene, Rob Dillingham, Castle, et cetera, et cetera. We're gonna cover a lot of these guys, but so far, of the episodes that have come out, I would say Cody Williams is definitely. I would probably even take him over Reed Shepherd. Barely. It's close because there's things that Reed does, but in terms of size wise, I mean, size is one of Reed's concerns in terms of height, and there's no height concern with Cody, and he can fill out. Guys will fill out. It's more of the other aspect. Coach,
Where he'll be picked, let's just say that we keep that fifth, sixth pick in this draft. And whenever you're picking there, you always pick the best talent, best player. It's not about need. But if the best talent also fits your most pressing need, then it's a win. Cody Williams, in a sense, if they feel he's the best talent, he kind of does fit a potential need for this team. That defensive versatility, the efficiency on offense so far, just that all-around kind of game. There's no major weaknesses here. His weaknesses, in my opinion, he's small. He's got to get stronger, and you can do that. That will take time, but from a skill, height, all that kind of thing, I don't see really too many weaknesses with him.
I do have a question for both of you, which is you talked about taking the best player available. I agree with that, especially if you end up keeping your pick and you're that high up, or if they trade into that period or position of the draft, because some teams may, as per usual, just may not necessarily need that type of player. So, for example, if Charlotte ends up moving lower or whatever and picks fifth or sixth or whatever, does Charlotte necessarily need a guy that basically plays similar to, I mean, Charlotte needs a lot of everything, but or and you know what? Another good example is actually who I would target to trade with is Memphis. Does Memphis necessarily need a Cody Williams when they already have a Gigi Jackson, when they already have a Desmond Bain, when they have, it's Memphis might actually be the perfect team to trade with in the future, or even potentially now, especially since they have two picks. Or no, sorry, they traded one of the picks away. They traded the Golden State pick away. But so you could see guys, getting traded or moved around. But from a best player available standpoint, are you okay taking a best player available who, in terms of their upside? Because, for example, I know people, just use Selene as an example. Say he could potentially have the quote unquote highest upside if he reaches his 95th percentile. But are you willing to risk that over picking a guy who has a lower, like, how do you view best player available?
I think it depends on what stage you're at with your team. If your team is at ground floor, then yeah, you just get the best talent you could find. And if that means it takes a while for that talent, so be it.
Gotcha.
The question I guess I have to ask, if you want to look at it from a Raptors perspective, is I guess what I'm trying to determine is what phase we're in. Are we actually in ground floor level where it's just anything? And or we think that, okay, we have some pieces to work with, and now it's okay, let me see if we can find a spot that can complement those pieces. I'm still not sure yet which one we're in. Hopefully the next 40 games will determine which one we're in. I got to lean which way I think we're in, but we'll see.
So, for example, say there's the next Giannis. I'm not saying that the French kid is the next Giannis. I'm not saying that at all. But hypothetically, say he could be the next Giannis. Is it worth that wait, or is it better to get someone who is, say that, a little bit lower, but has they're not taking 4 years to get there?
You're saying the safer picks.
Yeah, I think it depends on exactly what you have on the roster right now, right? Because if the three guys we're talking about actually start to kind of show something by the end of the season, then it makes it a little different what type of guy you need to pick. If all of them are flat and it's like, okay, we are where we are as of today, then to your point, well, we're starting from ground zero. Pick the French kid if he's gonna be the best high side when it's all said and done. Because we're not going anywhere with what we got right now.
Absolutely, man. I guess that makes sense right there. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
Um,
French kid is 6'11" and Cody Williams is 6'8". To me, the French kid would have a little bit more intrigue. I'll just put it that way. Because if he can move just like him, if he can, well, you probably want to go with the guy who is close to 7 foot. If it's true that he's 6'11". Now, if they're the same height, yeah, go with who you think, I guess, is the best talent at that point. Because we're so devoid of talent right now. To me, you just go, if it's one of these big wings that you have the ability to pick, you're probably not going to go wrong. But who's the best talent in their opinion? Upside.
It's a good question.
I don't know, man. This day and age, how this game is going. Now we'll see what rule changes come out. That's another thing's going to play into this because these are actually going to let guys play defense after this year. But if that comes into play, I think we've seen the last decade where the smaller guy, when they had a decision to make of two guys, the smaller guy ended up being the better pick. Right? We saw it with Odom and Durant.
And he's not smaller by that much either.
No, right? But he was one playing center, the other guy's playing small forward. We go with Morant, Williams.
No, I'm just saying like Cody versus.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's like one guy's 6'8", the other guy's like a couple inches more potentially. Maybe we don't actually know.
The question is the value. Yeah, the value of the playmaking wing, is it better than in this case what you get for a really, really good top end center? Now maybe things are changing because we've seen centers start to dominate a lot more big time front court players. That's starting to happen the last 4 or 5 years. So maybe it's the pendulum swinging back the other way. And to Coach's point, maybe that's what you need to get.
See, I look at things. Sorry.
Don't mean to. If the saloon kid is 6'11" and you got Scotty, you got two guys that little 3-4 interchangeable, which is interesting.
Well, assuming that Scotty wants to play down below, and we figure that out soon, because that goes back to Beyond's point. Like, all jokes aside, like, what is Scotty? Is he a point guard or is he not a point guard? And if he isn't, then like that changes, for example, the type of guard that you're putting beside him, right? You're putting someone that's more of an offensive initiator. Scotty the offense still quote unquote runs through Scotty, where he touches the ball quite often in most sets, but he's not necessarily the guy bringing up the ball or like doing the initial action. He might be doing the secondary action after the first advantage has been created. I lean towards Cody Williams. This is what I'm going to say. And it has not necessarily anything to do with Scotty Barnes. I, number one, don't trust our development staff. And number two, I want the person who has the higher chance. I don't want to wait 3 years for a guy who might pan out. I've seen that far too often. I've seen Bruno Caboclos. I've also seen guys who get to the point where you're just basically a farm system for the league, where you're trading these guys up and then they leave. And that is a risky proposition for this Raptors team. So I would rather someone who say they're not the next Giannis, but say they could be the next, I don't know who you want to compare say the next Jalen Williams, right?
Well, that's what crossed my mind when you said his name, because like if you see Oklahoma City's philosophy, they don't pick projects.
Just go. They do every so often, like Poku.
Usually when they have multiple ones, they'll throw one as a bone for a guy. But when they're picking, like in the heart of it, they ain't messing around with dudes and say, "Oh, wait a couple of years." Every one of them dudes they pick, that's in like quote the lottery section, dudes that can play on day one.
A perfect example is. Yeah, a perfect example is Cason Wallace. A lot of people didn't really like his game because it was so boring. I liked his game because it was kind of boring in a sense, because it was so like textbook level good that it wasn't really appealing to watch for a lot of people. A lot of people like Scotty because he does the no look stuff, but it's like, for me, it's like, I don't think that's fine. You could have that, but I also want players who just you're ready to go, and you have a much easier developmental path instead of saying there's a split decision of he can become this or he can become this. This is what you are, not in a boxing
No.
you know,
But guys
in.
have this on a certain level that they're already starting at, right? And that's what OKC does better probably than anybody. Like any
Yeah,
of the guys we could think of, like Giddy, Wallace, who else are we talking about in this case? The Williams boys, all of them. They were like,
Yeah.
they came in, they're ready to roll. And of course,
yeah.
Chet, right? Like,
So say the guy comes in, like this guy, Cody Williams. I don't have to teach him how to shoot, number one.
he's a
Number two,
dribbler.
I don't have to, you can more work on his dribble, but I don't have to completely work around his dribble and stuff like that. So there's just less that I need to work on. And from that standpoint, I like that. I like having players that you don't have to, that aren't fully clay. And maybe he can become your Paul George or something like that. I'm cool with that. But, you can work your way to there, and there's a much easier path. It's almost like some of these guys, it's like, what's the chance of X player becoming a Paul George versus becoming a Giannis, right?
Mhm.
And becoming Giannis is a lot harder than becoming Paul. Becoming either is hard. But
Yeah.
I'm just, in terms of becoming Giannis, it's like you have to already have a particular body, a certain, all of this kind of stuff. And there's more players that might at least try to imitate or might be capable of imitating a Paul George, even though Paul George is also an extremely high level, just philosophically. Any final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the draft has in store for us. So we'll see. I mean, this was a pleasant surprise, man.
It was. So with that being said, stay tuned. These episodes, I don't know when these specific ones will come out, but they will come out along the way. And we're just gonna keep banking up these episodes and have a release schedule as people slowly start to realize the situation that the Raptors are in. So with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, stay tuned, have fun, and take care and peace.